Well, welcome. Today, we're going to learn something. I mean, every time you hear the word district attorney, it brings visions of a person who can solve a case within 24 minutes, can have every forensic test run within 8. But then you realize that's all TV. Now we're going to look at what our district attorney actually does and how much work actually gets accomplished, not only, say, in a strategic way, but our district attorney gets involved in tactical things, like supporting our youth centers, supporting our sports teams. But why don't we start with an introduction?
Well, thank you. Joe Early, and I'm your Worcester County District Attorney.
Now, Joe, most people, like I say, when they hear DA, it's law and order. Call the DA and we'll try the case. We'll put the bad people away within 18 minutes.
Yeah.
What is the real DA's role like?
And it's interesting you mentioned that, Al. It's they call it the CSI effect. Oftentimes, we'll be trying cases, and from what people get from Law and Order, from CSI, they'll think that's just what it is. But actually, as Chief O'Loughlin in Milford, who does a great job for you, can tell you, there's a lot of hard work that goes into every investigation. Milford's a big part of the county. You get a great chief, with Chief O'Loughlin. You get a great police department, and they do a great job working with us. Overall, though, the DA's office, we've got 180 people. We've got about 80 attorneys. 60 cities and towns, and we're responsible for every crime that occurs within the county.
You've got a fifth of the Commonwealth under your...
Yeah, geographically, we're about the biggest. Geographically, we're about the biggest. Numbers-wise, we're about 810,000, according to the last census.
I'm just thinking of 300 towns and cities.
Yeah.
If you got 60 of them, wow.
Yeah, it's a big number. We've got a great district court here. I love Milford. I mean, my father used to have Milford as part of his congressional district years and years ago. Used to work with, was Representative Bert Nazi at the time. You go back to local people like Emilio Diatalevi, who used to work with them. Milford's always been a big part for our family, and it's a big part of the DA's office.
Well, I always joke and say, there's 28,000 of us that know Milford's the center of the universe. There's 6 billion that need to be educated.
Yeah.
So how far, when you talk about 60 towns and cities, sounds overwhelming. What's the geography like?
Well, see, they call it the Middle District, but really it's Worcester County. We picked up Bellingham and lost Athol. So you get 59 within Worcester County. Bellingham did it so that they could come to the Milford District Court rather than have to go to Dedham District Court. It meant a lot easier time for their police officers, a lot easier time for the victims of crime, where you'd be making a much smaller trip, shorter trip, rather than going all the way to Dedham.
So we go from Milford to how far?
We go from Rhode Island to New Hampshire.
Oh. So you got the whole middle swatch.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We're bordered by Middlesex. We're bordered by Norfolk. We're bordered by Hampden County. We go down Rhode Island, all the way down the Blackstone Valley, all the way up to Washington and Florida, Massachusetts.
So now there's one Grand Poobah, one DA.
Yeah.
But you got 179 support.
Excuse me. I say Washington, Florida. We go right up to the top of the state. But you hear towns you've never heard of before, all along the top.
Well, when you say you go from New Hampshire down, that kind of carves the picture.
Yeah, that kind of carves the picture.
179 other people that support your office.
Yes.
How does that break down?
Well, it's interesting. We've got 80 attorneys. And our attorneys make up several divisions. We have 11 district courts, Milford District Court being one of them. We have 4 juvenile courts. We have a superior court, which is based in Worcester, which has all the major felonies. The district courts hear the cases that are misdemeanors or have dual jurisdiction, meaning you can get state prison time or you can get house of correction time. Generally, when it's state prison time, those are your felonies. Those are the cases that are handled in superior court.
Those go to Worcester more?
It'll depend. The severe crimes of violence, stuff like that, yes, those will end up in the superior court. If you have possession of drugs with intent to distribute, those could remain based on the weight of the drugs in the district court. They could also go to the superior court.
Okay. So what kinds of attorneys then? Are there, you got how many?
We've got 80. And it's interesting because within the 80, we have a juvenile division, which I'd like to talk about at a little bit of length. I'll get back to that in a second. We have a juvenile court, 4 juvenile courts. We have a juvenile division. We have a district court division. We have a superior court division. We have an appeals court division, and we have a gang unit, and you know, and we have kind of a gun unit, major crimes involving guns and major felonies. What we do though, we don't just prosecute, we also put a big emphasis on the prevention of crime. And within that, we do a lot of stuff with kids. I was a defense attorney for 17 years before I became the district attorney. I started out as an assistant district attorney in Springfield, Mass. for 3 years. I was an assistant attorney general in Boston for another 3 years. Then I came back, I went and put out my shingle, went into business for myself. And for 17 years, I remained in a special assistant attorney general doing eminent domain cases, but I did everything from criminal to civil to mental health for 17 years.
So you really knew the other side before you went into the DA's role.
And you know, people say that can be very hard. That can be very hard going, you know, from representing people as a defense attorney, you know, what some people would say were bad people, to going to be a DA. But it wasn't. 85–90% of the people that came through my door on the criminal stuff were there because they made mistakes because of drugs and alcohol. And what I like to think that gave me is a big education, if you will. And then you take that and relay it to kids. I know the best way to prevent crime is to deal with kids between the ages of 7, really as young as 7, you know, through the age of just one day short of their 18th birthday. But when you get to kids when they're young, and this is why we put our best and brightest attorneys in the juvenile court. And the juvenile court's outside of the purview of the public. It's behind closed doors. But it's such an important court. And I would argue that it's our most important court because when you get to these kids when they're young, you can modify and change behaviors so they don't become recidivist. And that's why, one of the reasons I can remember driving around with my father, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I want to give something back." And he said, he thought I was a little bit crazy. I said, "No. Look at what you did. There isn't a day or a week that goes by someone doesn't say, your father helped us with this, or your father got UMass here. Your father did this, he did this." And I decided I wanted to, it's a noble profession, I wanted to give something back. Helping other people is a noble profession. And I thought the best way I could do that is to prevent crime. And I like to say, I'd much rather prevent a crime than have to solve a crime. But when you work with the kids, for example, we take drug dealers' money, give $5,000 every year to the Milford Youth Center. That's money that drug dealers had made profiting off of putting the poison into our neighborhoods. I put it back into the community. Give the Milford Youth Center $5,000.
Again, more importantly, that activity, whether it be the youth center or anything similar, you're taking a whole group of kids, expending a lot of energy in a positive way.
For sure.
How do you do better than that?
You don't. You don't. And the Department of Justice tells us they've given us some money for grants, and we actively seek grants. We got a grant up in the Webster Dudley area at the Boys Club. The police department ran a basketball league during the summer, got kids off the street. For 2 weeks they were around police officers and responsible adults. They tell us for every $1 that you put into activities like that, you end up saving between $7 and $10 in the criminal justice system. Some of the other stuff we've applied for, some of the other grants, is the opioid task force. I started a Central Mass opioid task force. The chief's a member. John Fernandez is a member. Representative Fernandez. Love doing business with John. And John really cares about this community, and it's shown in a lot of ways. Everything from the changes he's made.
He better. He grew up in the Heights.
Yeah. Well, John's done a lot of good stuff with regards to being the chairman, public safety, doing justice. He's done a lot of good stuff.
You mentioned putting kids together with police officers.
Yes.
You know, and you never really know the whole story. I mean, I'm really proud that Milford's had 2 demonstrations concerning the police. One was a miserable rainy day when a whole bunch of people got out to say thank you. We really appreciate what you do.
Yeah.
And now recently, it's the only sign I'll put up in my yard. It's a sign that is going all over Milford saying we support the Milford Police Department.
I saw that with the thin blue line going through the middle of the sign. I saw that driving in today, yeah.
And to me, that's kind of, the statement of how much we understand. I mean, I grew up with people like Artie Russo driving me to hockey. So when people talk badly about police, I'm thinking,
yeah, shame on them.
Artie? No.
Yeah.
You know, Danny Ducarel? No. All the people you knew.
Yeah.
And the perspective, because I ran into Artie in the grocery store. I said, tell me about this body cam. Because it seems to me like it's a perfect way for the police who are doing the right thing to protect themselves.
Yeah, you know, I say my philosophy on, let me go back to something you said earlier, getting your right to hockey from an off-duty police officer. These guys are asked to do so much. It is one of the toughest jobs on this planet. They're held to a standard that not many and many other professions are held to. And I remember a police officer saying, Detective Lieutenant for our State Police Detective Unit, Al Hunt, saying, there's no such thing as a routine traffic stop at 1 or 2 in the morning. Yeah. These guys put themselves out there every day. So the body cameras, I look at it this way. You know, that's a decision I think the chiefs for the cities and towns should make. You know, talking to the rank and file. Some chiefs love them, some chiefs not so much. But I think that's a decision they should make, working with their rank and file.
But Joe, I never knew the perspective, because when Artie told me he doesn't like them, I said, why? He goes, Albert, I know all the kids. When he was going on his bike and all, he says, if there's a good kid who made a silly mistake,
right,
I'm going to cuff him upside the head in the old days and say, get home, or I'm calling your father.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah.
If I got a camera on, I got to take him in.
That discretion's gone. That's one of the real downsides to this. If a police officer in their discretion knows a kid made a mistake, and they can genuinely tell that this kid's, you know, just horrified over this, you know, he's grieving over this, whatever he's done, it takes that discretion away from the police officer. And we're not talking about carrying a gun or you know, dealing. We're talking about a kid maybe being disorderly, maybe having a can of beer.
He got wound up in front of the high school, well, the old high school, the wall. You're screaming, you're doing something silly. You know, God forbid, Joe, we never at 16 and 18 ever did anything silly.
I got screamed at more than once by police officers. I had an uncle who was a police officer. It wasn't such a bad thing.
And the biggest threat they had over me was, stop or I'll call your father. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I knew if I got home to my father and there was a police officer calling, the worst punishment I was going to get was when I got home.
Do what you want, beat me, do whatever, don't call my father.
I heard, spare the rod, spoil the child. I heard my father talking about the old St. John's in Worcester on Temple Street. And he was talking about corporal punishment. And, you know, and of course, that is something that is so far in the past. But he made a point about talking about some of the people that CEO of General Motors, or this guy that ended up being a CEO, or a guy ended up being a congressman. You know, those brothers sometimes would take the stick or take the backhand to those kids growing up. Some tough kids in Worcester, and none of them were really the worse for wear. But everything's changed, going from that to where we are now. And it's changed for a lot of reasons. But I still think police officers out there know the community like no one else, especially better than the critics. In some ways, you can argue that there's way too much oversight on what they do, because they do it day in and day out, and they do it well.
But Joe, we're spoiled. In our little town at the center of the universe, we've got a great police force.
You really do.
We've got a chief who can talk to you.
Yes.
Who knows his stuff. I mean, you know, every year he comes in front of the FinCom. Tom's going to hit within $32.80 of his budget. I don't know how he does it, but somehow he'll hit the number and he'll get the job done.
Yeah, you know, you really do. The town of Milford has a great chief. I really enjoy working with Chief O'Loughlin, and I'm not saying that. I wouldn't say it if it weren't true. We had a murder not too long ago, the Kevin Gonzalez murder, and it took us into Milford. And I'll never forget your detectives and the way they were helping us work this. We got the 2 defendants, and they were brought there, and they were brought there for interrogation. And they were just into it. I mean, we're there at 1 at 2 o'clock in the morning. They're into it, and they're doing the interviews. They're helping the state police. They're working well together. There were no egos in the room. And by doing it, the way they did it, everyone working together, that's how we got, you know, to where we ended up charging these 2 guys.
But see, we're so blessed in Milford, because fire chief, 2E Rev 2, you know, Tom. You go through the whole gamut. They care.
Yeah, they really do. Well said, Al.
And they walk the walk. I mean,
Yeah.
I cannot forget years ago when we were in trouble financially, like every town. I was reading about how some of the neighboring towns' teachers deferred their raises.
Imagine.
And I'm saying, wait a minute, let me think about this. I can't afford my mortgage today. You're going to defer it, and I got to pay twice as much in a year. Our teachers came to the FinCom and said, we'll give up our raises, but you can't let any of all the money we give up has to stay in the school.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
What more can you ask?
That's, as my father used to say, that's just good. It's good government, and it's really people being involved and caring about it.
So 80 attorneys.
80 attorneys.
100 other people. 100 what are those 100 people doing?
Well, I'm real proud of the fact that when I get into office, it's been 9 years now. And it's hard. It's 10. And we have a child sexual assault unit, but we didn't have an accredited child advocacy center. And what that involves is when you have a child victim of a sexual assault, and they're some of our toughest cases, they're gut-wrenching and they're heartbreaking.
Whatever liberalism is left in me goes away when somebody hurts a child.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I'm sorry, I could never do that job because I would be on the other end of the bench.
You can handle a lot in this job, but we've got a duty to the kids. We've got a duty to the families. What we fought hard to do was get a nationally accredited child advocacy center. We partnered with UMass, and we've got it. And what that does is it protects the child in a number of ways. You know, we meet all the standards for accreditation. You've got an interview room, for example. There's nothing worse than a victim of assault, sexual assault, having to speak to multiple people. You know, in a way, you're re-victimizing the victim. They come into that room, talk to our experienced interviewer, and they're behind a two-way glass. On the other side of that glass, you'll have a psychologist, you'll have a prosecutor, you'll have a social worker, you'll have someone from the medical school, all listening in, so the child only has to tell this story once. It's audio and videotaped. And
do they still use the room with the glass?
Yeah, we do on those.
I got to ask you a question. With today's technology, why?
Well, because everyone gets to sit behind. You're not sitting in the child. It's just a one-on-one.
No, but I'm saying I got cameras. Why do I need to be looking? I mean, that always seemed intimidating that there's this wall of glass.
Well, it can be, but for the child, I don't think the child, typically, you know, we have children as young as 4 or 5, they're not thinking that way. They're not thinking that way. I know, there's some of our worst cases. We also have young teens, but they're sitting there and they're doing their interview, and the interviewer is a real professional. But before they come in, they sit in a waiting room. We've got a television with Disney movies. We've got books. It's painted with warm colors.
We try to give them a little bit of normalcy.
Yeah. We've got victim witness advocates who are second to none. They're part of our, led by Margaret Rwamba and a victim witness staff. You know, and they sit with the child. They hold the child's hand. They talk to the parents. They let them know that you're not alone. You've got us. We remove the tears, we remove the fears, remove the anxiety about being involved in the court system, and we talk to them about what the possible outcomes are, what we can do for their child, how strong a case it is, you know, and it really is. My staff that does that work, it's really noble work.
They're angels. I don't know how
well said.
Thoughts of a 12-gauge enema would come to mind when I would look at anybody. How can you can't say sexually abuse a 5-year-old? I mean, that's our 15-year-old. Those are kids.
There's some bad people out there.
You know, it's like, okay, you're a sick animal. You're like a dog with rabies. I'm sorry, I get emotional because
all right, we'll move on to another part of the office.
No, but it's just
you
know, God bless the people.
But that's what we do.
Keep calm.
That's what we do.
Help the kids.
We couldn't survive. So much goes on in this county that people don't see. And our people that do that work, that's the type of work that lasts forever.
Oh, yeah.
You see some things in politics, you know, people take credit for this or credit for this. The work that those people do isn't fleeting. It lasts forever.
Well, anybody that can help a kid get over a trauma like that, you're going to affect their lives. You know, you got
in
50,
a very
60
positive
years.
way. You know, help give them some closure. You know, the nice part about a lot of child victims is that, you know, depending on the age that it happens, we can help them. We can give them closure. You know, we can't undo the wrong, but we can give them closure. We can send that person to jail, and then they can move on with their lives, and the family can feel better, and they can move on. Now, that's one aspect of what we do. Another one we're doing right now, as I mentioned, I started a Central Mass Opioid Task Force. We've had about 90 heroin and opioid deaths, prescription medication this year. We're on track with the triple-digit figures that we've had for the last 3 years. And your chief does a great job, one of the first people to get a drop box. And we've got a group 200 strong, over 200 strong now. Anyone, if you're looking to join, you can go to the Worcester DA website, and it tells you how to join. We've got Learn to Cope. And for anyone who's got someone in addiction, at home, a child who has lost someone, you've got to call Learn to Cope. You've got to Joanne Peterson, who started the group. These people are amazing. They let you know, again, you're not alone. They let you know, there's going to be relapses as part of recovery. We meet on a regular basis, every couple of months, but we have working groups. And this is one of our biggest problems now. I just finished a great book, for anyone who's looking information on the opioid crisis, called Dreamland by Sam Quinones. And it talks about how we got, in a capsulized version, it's Dreamland by Sam Quinones. I don't have a piece of the book. I couldn't put it down when I started, though. It talks about how a doctor sent a letter to the New England Journal of Medicine, and at the end of his letter, there was about a paragraph where he had reviewed, I think it was about 1,200 patients at Mass General Hospital in Boston, and one of the hospitals in Boston. They found that 4 people became addicted to opioids when they're given in a hospitalized, hospital setting with a doctor, nurse, in a bed. Purdue Pharma took that paragraph and marketed, they had just marketed terramycin, which helped with everything from pneumonia to a bunch of other maladies. But they took the marketing lessons that they learned marketing terramycin and told doctors who hadn't had a lot of pain training in medical school that OxyContin was non-addictive. And it just promoted pill pushing, and it promoted doctors writing these prescriptions. They said the answer's been here for 2,500 years, and it's opioids. Well, we know now. This bill that just got passed, John Fernandez was a big part of that as well, that nothing could be further from the truth. Purdue Pharma actually ended up pleading guilty in federal court to 1 count of misbranding. 1 year they had a $623 million fine, which I guess is about what they make in 3 weeks.
I was going to say, that's less than a month's earnings.
And when you see the number of pills. And then pain became the 5th vital sign. And, the smiley face. You get temperature, blood pressure, but pain became the 5th vital sign, and the doctors were told to believe in what the patient tells them. And so a lot of these pills started going out. Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito doing a great job on this as well. With the legislature, and they recently got this knocked down to 7 days is a maximum for what you can get for a prescription. The governor wanted 2 to 3 days, and it was interesting. In the article, I think it was the Sunday before last, it told how Purdue Pharma was spending $1 million on lobbying legislators that 2 to 3 days it should be expanded to 7. But from there, and it talked about the influx of heroin into the country from Jalisco, Mexico.
You see, that was eye-opening to me.
Yeah.
Because when we grew up, you think of the heroin addict. It's a shady guy in a dark alley, that we all feel is beneath us.
For sure.
And then all of a sudden, Sheriff Lou, Tom comes on and says, Al, you're not getting it. It's your neighbor's son, daughter, who got hurt playing soccer, who got a few oxycodons, and all of a sudden, OxyContins, they're off them. Now they're hooked.
Yeah.
And I guess he said it was $1 a mig.
So $1 a milligram, right? And Lou's a member of Lou does a good job. Lou's a member of our task force as well.
So all of a sudden, this whole opioid thing, I couldn't compartmentalize it to shady, bad people in big cities.
Right.
These are my neighbors.
What the book also tells you is there's the area at Nayarit, Mexico, small town, Jalisco, Mexico. They started, they had young men who made money farming sugarcane, a brutal existence, but they started sending them up to different parts of the United States with the black tar heroin from Mexico. And they told them to go to the rural suburbs. You know, a lot of the neighborhoods that were primarily white, if you will, and to market, because they had money, they had cars, they could buy this stuff. So they'd go to methadone clinics during the day, and at the time we weren't given enough methadone for the addict to get through the day, and they'd give them free samples of the heroin. And that's how Columbus, Ohio, Portsmouth, Ohio, that's how Weymouth, Mass. That's how some of these areas started to get this influx of black tar heroin. And when they'd get arrested, you know, a detective would make the arrest. They'd only have half a dozen bags on them, and there's small balloons in their mouth. Sometimes they'd have a bottle of water there so they could swallow them. But for someone who had such a low quantity of the drug, you might get a little bit of jail time, but for the most part, you'd get deported. And it wasn't until the DEA, the FBI, started really grabbing the phones, dumping the phones, and getting the information, so all of these calls were going back to Mexico. And this was all being driven out of Mexico. And it's just a fascinating read. It really lets you know.
It's amazing, because when you sit there and say, okay, a tablet, $80. Where is a high school kid going to come up with, I don't know if you can steal enough to come up with 240 bucks a day.
They do steal, and when that money runs out, then they turn to the heroin, and the heroin's cut with
fentanyl. That's what Sheriff Lou said. He said $15, $81.
Yeah. And it's much cheaper. I don't know when Lou was on the show, but it's even cheaper that now. You buy 100 bags, you can get them for as cheap as $4, $5 a bag.
Oh my God!
But the problem is, and Lou knows this as well, there's just no quality control.
Well,
so now they're cutting it to give the addict.
That was John Fernandes' big thing with the fentanyl cut.
Yeah, 50 times stronger than heroin. And they cut it, and there's just no quality control on the stuff. And you know, it's amazing. People think prescription drugs are safe. They're not. You know, 80% of the people who go to heroin have started with a prescription pill. And between, I think it's around 70%, you know, will die. The overdose is going to be because of prescription medication, which people think is safe, in addition to the heroin. So the prescription pills are a big problem. And John Fernandes, and I got to give him credit on this, they did a fentanyl trafficking bill because we just didn't have any real penalties to send people to jail on the fentanyl. There was nothing, and they did a great job on that.
And yet, I mean, I always found it amazing when I'm hearing people talk about the good heroin, which was pure heroin, versus the bad heroin, which was laced with fentanyl. And again, not being, thank God, not being exposed to it. My wife and I looking at each other saying, good heroin?
Oh, that, you know, and that's what, I mean, I've mentioned that book a couple times now, but when I read this book, it gave me answers to a lot of questions that I didn't have. You know, how the pharmaceutical companies made billions marketing this stuff, how the Mexicans sent the black tar heroin up to permeate the country, and how none of the hospitals, no one was ready for this when it happened. Nobody was ready for these overdoses when it happened, and how it was happening to rural kids in suburban communities, you know, like Milford.
But I hate to say it, but Joe, we don't want to believe it. I don't want to believe that in my little town, that this plague has come in.
You know, and I agree, but we have to. You've got 8 overdose deaths this year alone in Milford. Okay, there's 4 ways we're going to beat this problem, I believe. Okay, number 1, compassion. What they tell us is that this is a chronic illness. This is not a moral failure. It's a chronic illness. It's a disease of the brain. After you've been using for a while, you lose the ability to make decisions. Your body and your mind are just craving this drug. 2, better disposal practices, better prescribing practices. You know, UMass in Worcester is going to be the first hospital in the country as part of their medical school curriculum to offer opioid and pain management training with regards to the dispense of opioids. Before they get about 6 hours, now it's going to be a class with nothing but the pros and cons of dispensing this medication, when you should do it, when you shouldn't. Number 3, Narcan. Now, your police department has it. Narcan's a miracle drug. If this is a receptor for opioids in the brain, okay, when too much goes in and you overdose,
it's a respiratory inhibitor.
Stops it, right. So what Narcan does is it seals
covers the receptor site.
Yeah, So then it bounces off. I saw it work firsthand at a park in Worcester. Guy was gone. He was gone. I walked over, I knew Pete Roberge, the Worcester police officer. There were 2 fire engines, 2 ambulances, 2 police guys. I said, Pete, what do you have? Overdose, Joe. Did you try Narcan? He just said, watch this. Within 30 seconds, the guy sat up, asked where he was. They told him he had overdosed and asked him if he wanted to go to the hospital. Now, this is before the law changed where they can now put him in protective custody. He said, sure. It was like I had witnessed a miracle. So the more Narcan we can get out there, again, understanding it's a disease. And, you know, some people say, well, this is enabling use. I think the only thing it's enabling is a person to breathe. You know, we get them to the hospital. We've got a pilot program up in Fitchburg right now where when the person who ODs is given Narcan, they're brought to the hospital. We let them know how close they came to death. We have a recovery coach from AdCare. We work with Spectrum as well, but on this grant we work with AdCare. We ask them, are you ready to give it up? You almost died. The family does an intervention, if you will, and if they say yes, we put them in a bed. We've got money for 72 beds. It's a pilot program. If it works well.
That's one of those things where you sit there and you hear people say, I wouldn't give them Narcan. I'd love to see the person with a kid close to death, and they've got the pen in their hands. Like, really?
Well, here, you can go one step further, because now you might have your neighbor's kid. Like you said, it's no longer a disease of the inner city. It's no longer the jazz musician or the prostitute or the pimp that's shooting up. You've got kids in rural communities who have gotten their hands on opioid prescriptions. When the money runs out, the addiction is still there, they've turned to the heroin. No, it's a humanitarian thing. The 4th component of it is we've got some drugs out there now that help beat addiction. Vivitrol. You need Vivitrol, you need Suboxone that can be given to help get the people out of their addiction. You need counseling with that. Those are the 4 things that are going to help us beat this problem.
Now, you mentioned some of the programs. If I remember back, young Joe Early 10 years ago, running for his first DA slot, ran on prevention.
Right.
That was going to be a major plank in your platform. Okay, I'll put you on the spot. Been almost 10 years?
We've talked to over 500,000 kids in our schools about bullying, sexting, internet safety, drugs and alcohol, texting and driving, all of these programs to get kids to think about their actions and the consequences of their actions, whether it be online bullying, which is our #1 requested program, whether it's texting and driving. We've talked to, and I don't like to brag about the numbers, but it's well over 500,000 kids we've talked to, including in Milford, in every town in the county, about kids. I am so proud of that. And the juvenile delinquency complaints went down right away by over a third. I know we're successful there. These aren't headlines. Since you brought it up, I'll talk about it, Al, but I don't go out, you know, thumping my chest and say we've done this or that. And maybe I should, because people want to know what you're doing. But we've talked to over 500,000 kids in the schools. We've also been in the senior centers. I think I'm coming down to Milford on Friday. We talk to people in the senior centers about identity theft and fraud. So it's not just prevention with the kids, but it's prevention with the elderly. For example, the IRS scams. And it's amazing now how many of the elderly have gotten them, or how many of the elderly have gotten a call saying it's their grandson or granddaughter.
Oh, send money?
Send money. And don't tell mom or dad, grandma, I need it. You can't believe how many people still fall for this. And we just tell them, if you have a problem, call the DA's office. Let us, you know, we'll tell you, #1, if it sounds, you want something, it's too good to be true, it is. #2, if it's a threat, the IRS doesn't call you up and threaten you, not like that. But this is what I'm so proud of. So many prevention programs in the schools with the elderly, getting people smart. And again, you go back to the behaviors of young people. For example, if someone's involved in a sexual offense, we know that if we get to them before the age of 16, you know, we can turn it around so that we might have 25% become recidivist after this, but we can get to 75% and stop the behavior. You can save
75.
Yeah. After the age of 18, the numbers flip around to where, you know, you can only save about 25%, or modify the behavior 25%, 75% are going to stay involved with the activity. So it's so important to do what we do at the level with regards to the juveniles.
Now, you mentioned the immigrant issue.
Yes.
I mean, we always joke, because one of the big topics that comes up when people are running for selectmen and all locally is how are you going to deal with illegal immigrants? And again, I know 28,000 of us believe Milford's the center of the universe. But the last time I looked, immigration was done on a federal level.
Yeah.
Because I always laugh and say, what can Tom O'Laughlin do? Deport him to Bellingham or Rhode Island?
Right.
How does the DA's office get involved with immigration?
Well, generally, if someone gets arrested, you know, it's more of a federal issue than anything else. And we, you know, we had the horrible tragedy in Milford.
Yeah.
And you know, our office just won, you know, the appeal on that, and he's going to jail. He's staying in jail, the defendant. And generally, when there's something like that, you know, we'll notify the feds that someone's not a citizen. Sometimes we'll confer with the feds to see if they want to bring federal charges. With regards to sometimes the feds have the ability, the U.S. Attorney's Office, to give out heavier sentences than we can give out. We've done that, for example, on some gun and drug cases. But our involvement basically is handling the criminal offense and letting the authorities know.
But you're kind of limited as to what you can do. I mean, if you prosecute them, you can put them in jail. But you can't deport them, right?
No, that would be the federal authorities.
I mean, that's always the amazing part, is people really believe that Tom O'Laughlin can just decide and deport people.
Your chief does a great job, and he does a lot of things very well, but he can't deport people.
Right.
But he can notify the federal authorities, you know, work with us. And we got a great relationship. We have a great relationship with your chief and your rank and file. And what we do is we notify the proper authorities that, you know, we've got a situation or we've got someone.
Well, you have to work within the boundaries of what you can do.
Right. And, you know, prevention was just an aspect that I'm proud to bring into this job that hadn't been practiced before in Worcester County. You know, how do you save the taxpayer dough? You know, you keep the kids out of the criminal justice system. And people can identify with that. And we've put well over $1 million that we've taken from drug dealers back into the community. One of the other programs we have, giving kids, not just the youth center, but giving kids a safe place to play. We'll work on Little League fields. I have a crew. For example, a young adult, a girl or a boy, will get arrested for minor in possession of alcohol. They'll give us, I'll postpone the arraignment. They give us 8 hours of community service, and it's 8 hours of pretty hard work. If they do that and take a 1-hour online test about drugs and alcohol and successfully complete it, I'll dismiss the case prior to arraignment. And the reason is, it holds the kid accountable, as opposed to mom or dad coming in and writing a check for $500 and have the case continue without a finding. Then they have a record, you know, because.
But it also hasn't, the life lesson isn't the same.
No, not at 17, 18, 19. They give me 8 hours of community service, picking up trash, fixing up a field, things of that nature, which then also benefits to the kids who are using the field. So it's kind of, you get a double bang for your buck, and this is one of the programs I'm real proud of. Out of the first 1,500, we may have had 40 who were recidivist, and even a couple of those I gave another shake to. But
1,500, well, only 1,460 to the good?
Yeah. Not bad numbers.
Last time I looked, 90-some%.
Yeah.
It seems like an A rating.
It's an A rating, and you know, and we did it for marijuana, and I know the people who want to legalize pot, and I'm voting against the legalization bill. We see so many accidents on the road. I don't need a message to young people that it's okay to smoke pot, because they're going to get behind the wheels of cars, and I don't need people with slower reaction times and diminished capacity operating on one side of the road while a mother in a minivan with 3 kids is on the other.
Massachusetts drivers are so perfectly behaved and quiet. And you're going to add another factor?
No. But what we used to do was, if a kid got arrested for marijuana as well, the people looking to legalize it would say, you're giving them. We didn't give kids a criminal record for pot. We put alcohol and drug offenders, we put them in the diversion program.
Okay, what's a diversion program?
That's what I just mentioned.
Where you're going to make them clean and learn.
Yeah. Give us 8 hours. You hold them accountable. They become accountable. They're giving something back to society, and I'm not destroying their lives forever in case they want to get a loan later or a government job. Someone might even want to get into law enforcement, but be prohibited from something they did when they were 18 years old. And I think this is a better lesson, and I think the numbers bear it out.
So now, again, we watch TV, and it's always, well, we got to convince the DA to take the case. How much latitude? None. We don't. Well, it's like, wait a minute, we got to go beg the DA to enforce the laws. And you hear that all the time.
Yeah, you do on television. Television's interesting, I'll tell you. One of my favorite CSIs, Grissom's there. They go, Grissom, we got the plate. And he goes, wait, how do you got it? The reflection. What reflection? Off his eyeball. You know, you don't see that in the real world. We get detectives who, you know, who go out, it's shoe leather and it's knocking on doors to get answers. What you see on TV, you know, can we persuade the DA to take the case? Well, if it's a drug case, if it's a gun case, there's no discretion. We're going to bring those charges, okay? If it's a murder case, all right? For example, the Gonzalez murder.
So you don't decide on a murder?
We do on a murder. When to charge, who to charge, and if we charge. That's an instance, you know, we make sure we run out all the ground balls. We follow the leads and the evidence wherever it goes. And then if we have enough to charge, we charge. But I have a moral duty, an ethical obligation. If there's probable cause on a case, and I feel that we can prove the case, then I can bring the charges. You know, you can't just willy-nilly charge someone, or oh, it might be him. Geez, if we arrest him, we might get more information. That isn't allowed, not under our Constitution and not under our ethical rules of conduct.
Well, it's under normal, humane ethics. Come on, I mean, you don't want to be charged.
No.
When you had, well, you live in Milford. There was a murder in Milford. We'll just charge $24,000. We'll get the person there somewhere.
Yeah, no, yeah. We do a lot of good. You know, our office, whether it's being in the schools, being out in the community, talking to the elderly, whether it's working with victims of sexual assault, whether it's working with, you know, we have a domestic violence unit as well, and we have 3 prosecutors. Each handle about 1,000 cases a year, and there's still an overflow that we have to give to other prosecutors. But those prosecutors have special knowledge and skill with regards to the domestic violence case and helping the victim.
You'd almost have to, because I can't imagine if you're making a decision that you could split a family. Is it the better decision?
It all depends. You know, it's a lot goes into it. You know, we try and empower the victim. If, for example, we have special groups that will deal with high risk. For example, if it's an instance where there may be a weapon in the home, if there's been strangulation involved, we have high risk teams that will assess stuff like that. If it's an instance where there's alcohol and drugs involved, you try and get in front of a judge, try and get alcohol and drugs out of the picture. And I can't tell you how often in domestic violence cases, you know, the majority of times, clear majority of the times, it's the women who are the victim, but there's alcohol involved. And if we remove the alcohol, you know, you have A meetings, dealing with the problem, that can help. I'm proud to be on the Governor's Task Force with regards to sexual assault and domestic violence. You know, we're meeting regularly on that and trying to change the laws. For example, everything from campus sexual assault and violence to young girls with their phones now and taking pictures. Technically,
isn't that child porn?
Yes, it is.
I mean, that was the part that struck me, is when and again, I just read about it, that 14-year-olds are sending pictures of themselves.
Right.
And I'm sitting there saying, wait a minute, 14, 15, that's child porn.
Right, and you got a 16-year-old boyfriend taking a picture of a 14. Technically, it's child pornography. And that's where you have to have people with real experience in your juvenile court dealing with this. Obviously, the guy who's on a computer downloading thousands and thousands of pictures, who's in his 30, it's a much different case than where we have the 16-year-old or the 14-year-old.
The idiot who just doesn't know. It's
sharing
hormone-driven, either boy or girl.
Right. Sharing a picture with their boyfriend, and this is where it gets bad, or worse, is when they have a breakup.
Oh Lord!
And then there's revenge, and it's
now you post a picture and
right. So what we tell, for example, when we go out to the schools and talk about bullying and sexting, if you wouldn't take the picture and put it on your refrigerator in your kitchen, don't do it. Don't do it. It's interesting. I also talk to the kids about social media, and a good friend of mine, J.P. Ricciardi. JP is the assistant general manager, special assistant to the general manager for the New York Mets. And JP, I called up JP one day and I said, JP, you're looking at this kid from Worcester, he pitches over at one of the colleges. He came in, I talked to him, he looks like he's got a lot of talent, he can really bring it. He said to me, yes, Joe, we're aware of him. He is a big kid. He can really bring it. He has a huge, sports-wise, he has a huge upside, but we're not interested. And he caught me by surprise. I said, how's that, JP? And he said, Joe, one of the guys we employ used to be head of the Secret Service under Ronald Reagan. Before we talk to a kid's coaches, his friends, other players about him, we go and look at his social media. We look at his Twitter page, we look at his Facebook, we look at all the stuff to where he's had an opportunity to get out into social media. And if we see something about marijuana, drugs, or alcohol, something about that, we're not interested. And it's amazing how much life is changing for these kids right now because of this impulse control.
Well, I work with a lot of kids at my old school at Holy Cross. And it's amazing when I sit there and say, you think it's cute to have you with alcohol or, you know, you're with your friends looking like a buffoon? Guess what? I post a technician job in the lab. I had 178 replies. If I see goofiness, automatic. I'm not even going farther.
Yeah, good for you. You have to.
And you try explaining to them, guys, this isn't funny. You know, I mean, some of the young kids, girls, boys, you know, they went on spring break. Yeah. So there they are in the middle of whatever Florida beach with 100 people holding beer, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the kind of person I want to deal with.
Yeah. You think the FBI is going to want to hire you, or a police department, you know, if they see you holding a beer can.
And the poor kids look and say, but what? You're just being a kid. I said, you're right. But if you and 10 other kids have equal credentials, and you know what's sticking in my mind? You're the one drinking on the beach.
Yeah, and unfortunately it's tougher for kids. I mean, it's tougher for everyone now. It's tougher for police officers because people have the phones up. It's tougher for kids because you got kids who don't handle the alcohol, and kids don't drink for social drinking. They drink for effect at that age. You know, they'll break out their camera. They think it's funny, or you know, or you're doing something degrading to another human being. That's caught on camera. Those are the things that'll kill you for life.
But see, that's where I like your prevention program, because I don't think most 14, 15-year-olds understand that taking a not so proper picture of you or your significant other and getting that published somewhere makes you a sex offender for a very long time.
If you had a person in my position that took a different approach to this, you know, and just was looking for a conviction on that, you could get convicted.
If you had a DA that wanted stats, you could crucify.
Yes, you could.
And screw up the lives of a lot of good kids.
Some good kids because of an indiscretion, both girls and boys. That, you know, yeah, they could technically end up as a registered sex offender for the rest of their lives.
You know, you think through it and you say, oh my God, how would you explain to your kids? It was 30 years ago I took a picture of my girlfriend.
Imagine.
And that's why I can't be a coach of your baseball team or your soccer team.
And you can go one step further. I mentioned our bullying program, which we've had in a lot of the schools. When we go in, oftentimes, Ellen Miller does a great job with our office. I'll go and talk to the kids. We talked to them about a Safe School Summit, which we had today. We did a great program on the commercial sexual exploitation of children and how young girls get involved. We don't call them teen prostitutes. We call them commercially sexually exploited children because society accepts that more. And we talk about the different problems that got them there. But we also talk about...
Society accepts...
You hear the word teenage prostitute and you get a vision in your mind.
Teenage. No, I lock onto teenage.
Yeah.
My God.
Some people will lock onto prostitute, you know, whether it be...
These are kids then.
Exactly. Exactly. But they get hooked up and they're exploited. And these predators just, you know, they get on Backpage. They'll get on different things. They'll recruit these girls. They'll get these girls. It's a long program. There's a lot to it. But they eventually end up winning the affections of this child. And they end up turning them into prostitutes, if you will. But that was one part of our Safe School Summit today. And we do this on a regular basis as part of prevention. We talk about gangs. We talk about the way people and young people are connected with the internet and society today. But we also talk about bullying. And I remember at one of our Safe School Summits, the expert told us about a young boy who was getting bullied online. And these are some of our toughest cases. Kid will wake up in the morning and he'll go to the internet and he'll see who piled on. So-called friends. And we actually know that girls are a little bit worse than boys. And one boy told our expert, he said, you know, this went on for a while, and I get up every morning and I want to hurt myself. This was horrible. And, you know, and I came to the conclusion I'd rather take a physical beating.
Sure.
Think about it. Because a physical beating has a start point.
Joe, we all got into, when we were in school, a disagreement and took a punch from some person whose IQ was lower than their underwear size, and then it was over.
It was over. But, as he said, you'd wake up every day and people would pile on.
Oh, Lord.
And it's just a horrible, horrible form of bullying. So that's one of the messages we take to the kids.
Well, what can you do? I mean,
talk to the kids. Say, hey, golden rule it. Who's got younger brothers or sisters? Raise your hand. Okay. If you wouldn't want this said about them, don't say it about someone else. Try and personalize it so they start thinking. You know, number one reason people did it? Number one reason people did it because they thought it was funny. You and I are talking, you can gauge whether I'm happy, whether I'm upset, but you can gauge that. And we let the kids know you don't know how a person's reacting in their bedroom or in their living room at home when they see these messages. So you've got to be careful about what you send.
It's amazing. You know, I don't think about the multiplier effect.
Yeah.
That kids pile on.
Yeah. For sure. You know, it was kind of interesting, too, at one of the Safe School Summits. After one of the debates recently, I told the teachers, I feel sorry for you, because you had some words used in the debate the other night. You know, Little Marco or Crooked Ted or Lion Ted. You had words used that you wouldn't allow in your classroom. So it gets even more confusing because a kid who's interested in government sees a debate. You know, and now the teachers, you know.
This could be my CEO.
Right.
This could be the leader of my country. And they're accepting bullying.
Yeah. So it makes it ratchets it up to another degree, and it makes it even tougher. But you know, overall, I love what we're doing. The schools bring us in, especially the middle schools and the grade schools, and we get the message out to kids. Do we get to everyone? No, but we get to a lot of them.
But Joe, I'm a parent. My son, my daughter's getting bullied. What can I do? I mean, I can't go on Facebook and say, you little moron, stop.
No.
That's going to exacerbate everything.
For sure. First thing you do is go, you talk to your child. If you think something's going on, if their behavior's off, if they don't want to go to school, if they're not eating right, you talk to them. And you talk to them about talking to you or to a trusted adult. You know, I've noticed it. You don't judge. I notice some things are different. Everything okay. And we teach the kids, talk to a trusted adult, number one. If you know that something's going on, go to the school officials. You know, they're mandated under the new law to do something about it. Talk to the school officials. You can call the DA's office as well. You can call Chief O'Laughlin. These are type of things that you can do.
You get the call. There's that pesky First Amendment that you've got to be careful of.
Right.
Where's the line that you can say, wait a minute, this isn't nice, but I can call the parent? What can I do?
Well, if we perceive it to be threatening behavior, we can do something about it. If it's harassing behavior, after 3 times where a person might get charged for it, it becomes a criminal.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's a lot
so
of
even
options.
if it's kids on kids, because I always wondered, you know, with that pesky First Amendment there, do they have the right to say you're ugly? Yeah.
Yeah, they have the right, but you know, it's usually a lot more than that. And after the 3rd time, we can bring a criminal charge. But if nothing else, it gets school officials involved, and a lot of your school officials are great, and they just want to get involved. They want to stop it. You know, and our kids are so vulnerable these days. You want them going to school in a safe and healthy environment. No kid should have that type of problem.
I would think just the authorities getting involved would shake, probably not all the kids that are bullies. But
it has a pretty good effect.
I was going to say, it's got to shake a lot of the margin kids, you know, the good kids who are just piling on?
Yeah, and that's why we get into the schools. And that's why we get into schools, to let these kids know, you know, you talk to a trusted adult if you're having a problem. Because a lot of kids, when they do get bullied, don't know where to go, don't know what to do. There's a great movie that was out. It's a heartbreaking movie called Bully. It was shown in a lot of the schools. We have access to the movie. That's one of the things we've brought out as well. Shows a group of 3 different kids in the United States. Actually about 5 kids, 2 committed suicide and 3 who survived. But it's just, it's some gut-wrenching stuff. It's made more for the high school student.
Yeah, you talk about the kid not understanding. You got a high school kid, starts bullying.
Usually been bullied themselves.
I was going to say it's probably because they got bullied.
Oftentimes.
But then if the recipient of their bullying hurts themselves, oh my God, that's got an effect on them too.
For sure, and we've had several cases. A case was recently tried up in Essex County. Yeah, it's tough stuff.
And I admire what your office does.
We have a lot of good people.
I don't know that I'd have the intestinal fortitude to hold back. You know, I can't imagine looking at somebody that would hurt a child and saying, I know what's the right thing to do. And
there are days I come in and I'm, your head, it feels like you're going to explode. You levitate and you're so upset. And but you know, we got good people. Oftentimes when there's a problem in school, that's when we get called in. You know, and oftentimes, you know, it might be the 6th or 7th grade. 6th or 7th graders, I said oftentimes it happens more with girls than it does with boys, but that's when we're called in, and you know, we give these addresses. And any school that wants us, you can call the Worcester DA's office, ask for Ellen Miller, and she'll arrange something where we'll come out to your school. Well,
that's great, because you know, you always wonder, we're paying all this tax money, do we get anything?
Oh, we do.
And you know, Sheriff Lou, now your office, as we start peeling back the onion, you say, wow, there's a lot of good programs going on.
Oh, and we've been doing it for the 9-10 years I've been in office. We kind of hit the ground running. You know, I was a defense attorney, and I saw a lot of people come in my doors that had just made bad decisions. And I said, you know, I can take what I've learned as an ADA, Assistant District Attorney, Assistant Attorney General, and as a defense attorney, and incorporate this into this job, and that's what I tried to do. And I had black hair when I started.
I always say I had hair before I had daughters.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I have.
Love to hear it. Would love to have you come back in 6 months, because we could go on and on.
There'll be plenty more. There's plenty more to talk about.
And
for
just
sure.
Keep learning about what's available. To our 6 loyal viewers, as always, thank you for joining. It's always amazing the services that are available to help us. The unsung heroes. I don't know how people are doing what they're doing with these battered children, but God bless them for having the ability to do it. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
And may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. God bless. Good night. And I hope you keep joining us.
Not too long since I've been home.